Hey everyone, my name is Francis from Fujifilm. So you've got yourself a Fujifilm camera and you're thinking about creating some movies with it. Well, in this video, we're going to take a look at how to set your cameras and get it ready to shoot some videos. So keep on watching. Alright, so let's get right into it. So first we're going to set the resolution of the video, the frame rate, and the bit rate. So to do that, we'll simply go into the menu of the camera and we see movie mode, and then we're just going to select that option, and then we can see from there we do have different resolutions. So we have 4K 16:9, we have a DCI 4K, so 17:9, which will give more of a cinematic look. And we have full HD 16:9 and a full HD 17:9. Personally, I like to use the 4K 16:9. Next, we have the frame rate. So a lot of different options, but really the ones you should be looking at would be 23.98, 24p, 2997, or 5994. So 23.98 and 24p are very similar. The 23.98 just considers the drop frames, and the 24p is more of the film-based kind of frame rate. So these will give you a cinematic kind of look, which will give you sort of that motion blur effect and just very cinematic look. If you want more of a lifelike kind of frame rate, you're going to choose the 2997. Now, if you want sort of a surreal kind of look, you will get the 59.94. Personally, I don't really like this one for just standard video. As I would be talking right now, I wouldn't shoot it in 60 frames per second, and that's just a personal taste. But personally, I really like the 60 frames per second to shoot some B-rolls, to be able to slow down the footage by about 50% because I'm shooting at 23.98, and in that way I can get a very smooth slow motion at half the speed. So for regular use, I'm just going to be shooting in 23.98. Next, we have the bit rate. So we have three options. We have 100 megabits per second, 200 megabits per second, or 400 megabits per second. Now, the data rate will affect the image quality. So the details you're going to get more information the higher number you get. So 400 megabits, you'll have a lot of details, but the files will be very heavy. So personally, I like to set it to 200. So that way it's a good middle ground between image quality and file size. And you have to understand as well that if you shoot at 400 megabits per second, you will need a memory card that will be able to handle a writing speed of 400 megabits per second, and these can be quite expensive. So again, personally, 200 megabits per second is the sweet spot for me. Next, we have the file format. So we have three options on the X-T4. We have MOV H.265, which is going to give you a 10-bit video. Now, you have to be aware that using the H.265 codec, while very efficient and very high quality, it might be very heavy on your computer. So your computer might struggle to decode it, and you might have to use some proxies, which personally I am doing. But if you don't want to go through all that, and again, you want a middle ground between image quality and performance in terms of your computer, I would suggest you use the MOV H.264 option. This will give you a good image quality. You're going to get 8-bit, and you're going to have good audio quality as well, but it will be easier on your computer if you want to edit afterwards. Now, if you want something really light for your computer, so a little bit less in terms of image quality and sound quality, but much easier on your computer, you can choose the MP4, which again will be easier on your computer. So personally, I'm going to set it to H.265. Now, next we have movie compression. So we have two choices, all intra and long GOP. Now, if you choose all intra, you're going to be capturing every single image in that 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second, for example. So it will need to run at 400 megabits per second. So you're going to get really heavy files, and again, you're going to need a fast memory card for that. The next option, which is the most common one, is going to be long GOP, so long group of picture. So this has a little bit more compression, but will allow you to show you in lower bit rates like 100 or 200, for example. So that's my choice, long GOP. Next, we have full HD high-speed recording. So that's why you can record in high speed, so you'll get slow motion. So if we go into there, and then we can choose, so our frame rate, so that's what we want to use in our timeline. So for me, I'm going to choose 23.98, and then I can choose whether I want 120p or 240p. So the 120p will give me a 5 times slow motion, and then the 240p will give me a 10 times slow motion. So if you want to create really dramatic and really slow B-rolls for your videos, then that's how you would do it. So next we'll go to the different recording options. So we have 3. So we can choose to record in the standard Rec. 709 film simulation, which we call quick 4K. So that will be a video that's going to be ready to be seen on a TV or on the internet, and you have the ability to use film simulation and all that, and you can still, you know, grade it, but it will be basically ready to go in Rec. 709. You could choose to shoot in F-log, so that's log footage. So that's going to give you a very flat image, low contrast, low color, and it really is aimed to be color graded afterwards. And log footage is often used when you have different brands of cameras or different models of cameras and you want to match them. So if every camera is shooting in log, it will be very flat, and that will give you more room and more flexibility to grade it to make them match. F-log will also give you more dynamic range, so if you have contrasty scenes, it would be easier to bring back the highlights or the shadows, for example. If you're just starting out, I wouldn't advise going into the log footage just now. And then the last one, we have HLG, which is aimed to be seen on an HDR TV, for example. You could still grade it, but basically it's ready to be displayed onto an HDR monitor. So personally, I like to shoot into the film simulation mode, so that's what I'm going to be setting it at. And then lastly, for the movie settings, I want to show you the option of having the zebras. So you can choose either to have them on the right or left side. I'm going to choose left. So what zebra is doing is basically preventing you or warning you that you're going to be clipping your highlights. And what I mean by clipping is by making them fully white. So 100% would be just pure white, nothing to be recovered. And that's why I like to set it to 90%, because when I reach the 90%, I get a warning and I know it's going to be bright, but it's not yet blown. Then from there, you can choose whatever your tolerance is. You can set it at 95, you could set it to 80 to make sure you have a lot of room left in terms of highlight recovery. Next, we have the movie optimized control. So if I turn it on, basically it will disable the shutter speed dial, the aperture ring, and the ISO dial. So the settings will be controlled via the screen by clicking on the set icon here. And as you can see, I have a menu that pops up, and I can use my finger to scroll between the options, or I can use the joystick or the D-pad to change the settings. So this is very useful because if you're shooting both photos and videos, because in photo you might be shooting a shutter speed anywhere from, you know, 1/60th of a second to 1/8000th of a second. Now in video, the shutter speeds are much slower, and if you're shooting at, let's say you're always shooting at 24 frames per second, then your shutter speed is always going to be 1/60th of a second or 1/48th of a second. It's never really going to move unless you change your frame rate. And then your settings in the movie optimized control will always be saved in the movie mode. So if you switch from photos to video, your settings will be independent. The tally light is also a great feature whenever you're filming by yourself. Again, like I'm doing right now, you have the ability to set a tally light, whether it's in the front or in the back or both. And then that light will be flashing in the front of the camera as long as the camera's recording. So right now, I can't see the screen on this X-T3 that's filming me, but I can see the light blinking, telling me that the camera is actually recording. So that suppressed the risk of me talking and then the camera not recording because for some reason it stopped or I didn't press the button fully. So using the tally light is a very good way to making sure that your footage is actually recorded. So you know the film simulation from the photo side of things, and the great thing is that you can use them also into the movie mode. So whatever your favorite film simulation was on the photo side of things, you can also use them to record videos. Now, if you want a more flexible one that you can also do some post-processing on it, I would use the Eterna, which is really good as is, but can also be worked on really easily if you want to grade it afterwards. And again, all the film simulations you have on the photo side, you do have them on the movie mode as well. Now, let's talk about white balance. So the same way you can do white balance on the photo sides, you can do on the video side as well. Now, if you wanted to do a custom white balance, for example, you can do the same thing in the video. So you find your neutral gray and you can just click the shutter and then you have your white balance set. Now, if you're like me and you like to use auto white balance most of the time, it might be an issue on the video side of things, because as you move on different directions, the white balance might shift, and that will show in your video as you're moving, and it could be distracting. Now, one thing you could do is use the auto white balance lock, and to set it pretty easily, well, first we're going to set the white balance to auto, and then we're going to go and assign a function button. So we're going to use the AF on button, and then we're going to go onto auto white balance lock. Now that way, when I'm shooting, if I am on auto white balance and then I press on the AF on button, I'm going to lock my white balance. So now it's set to press. So if I let go, then it's going to start shifting again. So what I want to do is go into the menu and into the wrench icon to the button and dial setting, and then I want to go down and use the auto white balance lock mode and change it from pressing to on and off switch. So now if I press on the AF on button, I'm locking my auto white balance, and now press again and then it's unlocked. Now, another good feature if you're doing videos like I'm doing right now, where you're talking to a camera sort of interview style, where the camera is not moving, it's sitting on the tripod, and you have to have a higher ISO, then we have a pretty neat setting that you can use. So if you go into the menu and then you go to the IQ menu and then you go down to Intraframe noise reduction and you set it to on, that will actually help you to bring the noise level down. And as for an example, the camera you're looking down from right now is at ISO 4000, and we have the Intraframe noise reduction. And as you can see, there's very little noise. All right, now let's go into the autofocus and manual focus menu. So first, I want to go into the movie AF mode. Now you have two choices. Multi will basically let the camera focus on whatever's closest to the camera. So that's why I like to use area, and that will let you put your focus box wherever you want. So if you want to frame more to the left or to the right, you know, it's up to you. And then that way you choose where the camera is going to focus. We also have the option to shoot with face and eye detection, and you can choose whether it's going to track the face only or the eyes as well, and you can choose which eye you want. And I personally like to choose which eye it focuses on, so it doesn't jump between the right and the left eye whenever it's focusing. So usually I set it to the right eye priority. And as you can see, this is very useful when you're filming yourself, you create content like I'm doing right now. I'm using the face and eye detection to make sure I am in focus and that it tracks me whenever I'm moving. Now, if you want to shoot in manual focus, I would suggest you go and set the focus mode to linear. So you'll go into the wrench icon, onto the button and dial setting, and then you're going to go down and find the focus ring operation, and then you're going to set it to linear. So that way it's going to act like a mechanical lens, which means if you were to use a follow focus, for example, and you would set markers and you would move a certain rotation to a mark and you would go back, you would get the same distance in terms of focus. If you set it to nonlinear, the speed will change whether you go fast or slow, and that could lead to shift in focusing. So you want to set it to linear if you're going to use manual focus for video. Now again, if you're in manual focus, you might want to go into the menu and set the manual focus assist, and then you can go in and set the peaking, and you can choose between different colors, whichever you like better. I personally like the red, and I like to set it to low to make sure it's very accurate. You can see whenever it's going to be in focus, you're going to see some red appear in highlights. All right, now let's go and take a look at the microphone settings. So if we go into the menu to the microphone options, we have adjustments for the internal mic as well as the external mic. So you can go on auto, the camera will automatically balance it for you. You can go into manual and then make adjustments yourself, and then you can look at the meter to see basically where your audio level stands at. And this will be the same for the external mic as well. Next, you have a mic jack setting, so you can set it to mic or line. So mic will be if you're using an external microphone, for example. And then next you have line, which will be more if you're using, for example, a mixer and you have instruments plugged in it as well as a microphone and things like that, you would be using the line setting. So most of the time you would be leaving it to mic. Next you have the mic level limiter, which to some extent will prevent the microphone from peaking. You have wind filter on or off. Again, that's up to you to set. It'll basically cut the low frequency. So it's good to activate if you're filming outside. And next we have the low cut filter, which will basically cut into the bass frequencies. Now, as you go more and more about video, you might find yourself wanting to accessorize your camera to improve the quality of production of your videos. So some accessories you could be looking at would be a shotgun mic, for example, just like this one that would go onto the hot shoe to improve the audio quality. You could be looking at a cage just like that with holes where you could add accessories, just like a microphone, for example. You could set it there, and then that would open up the way for even more accessories, just like the Atomos Ninja 5, for example, right here. And then you could also look at a gimbal to get super smooth floating footage. And it is good to know that certain Fujifilm cameras are actually compatible with certain gimbals to be able to manually focus and start and stop recording from the gimbal itself. So these are some of the accessories you could be looking at to up your production value of your movies you're making with your Fujifilm X cameras. And I hope this video was useful to help you get started in creating some movies. And until next time, this was Francis for Fujifilm. Thank you for watching.